The land is sold. You have 90 days. Doug Spears said it across the conference table the way a man says something he has already finished thinking about. His attorney was beside him. His junior associate was beside his attorney.
Thank you. We're looking
Three
forward to it.
people representing a conclusion that had been reached before Gloria Tannen walked into the room. The fluorescent lights hummed. A court reporter's fingers were poised over the
Your
keys.
signature on page 3.
Gloria Tannen looked at the letter. Then she looked at Doug
Sure
Spears.
the deadline is met.
Then she reached for the manila envelope she had set on the table when she sat down, and she placed the lease copy between them and opened it to the flagged page. Paragraph 7, she said. The room went quiet. Not loud quiet. Not the quiet of an outburst or a confrontation. The quiet of a room realizing that something it assumed was settled was not settled at all. Spears' attorney leaned forward. He read. His jaw tightened in the particular way of a man whose careful preparation has just encountered a fact he was not given. But what Doug Spears didn't know, what no one in the Harlan Estate's current management knew, was that the woman they had mailed a vacant notice to had been reading paragraph 7 of that lease every spring since 1998. She had it underlined in her own pen. She had the document in a fire-safe box under her kitchen counter. And she had a farm credit pre-approval letter for $2.1 million dated 2 days ago. You know this kind of silence, the kind that changes what happens next. But before we get there, let's go back to November of 1991 and a field that was no longer her father's to farm. That evening at dusk, Harry Tannen stood at the edge of his 320 acres in Champaign County, Illinois, and he was standing outside the fence. He had been a tenant farmer on that ground for 22 years. The lease had expired. The landowner had sold to a different operation, and the transition was immediate. And Harry had no purchase right, and no notice of more than 30 days, and no recourse. He just stood there in the field road in November, with his hands in his coat pockets and the sky going grey above the flat black ground. Gloria was 26 years old. She was standing beside him. She said, "Dad." He didn't answer. He looked at the ground for a while. Then he said, "I should have asked for it in writing when I had the chance." She didn't know exactly what he meant. She would, later. Harry's health declined in 1992, and the work of farming the Tannen ground, which was leased then from the Harlan family through the estate of Robert Harlan Sr., an Indianapolis real estate attorney who had bought the Champaign County parcel in 1968 as an investment, fell to Gloria. She was 27, unmarried, equipped with her father's knowledge and her own stubbornness, and a deep clarity about what she was not going to let happen. She drove to meet the Harlan Estates attorney in Indianapolis, and she negotiated the lease. She paid first and last. She asked every question she had, and some she didn't know she had. The Harlan family patriarch, Robert Sr., was still alive then, 77 years old, in declining health, but present. He met Gloria at the lease signing. He shook her hand. He told her the ground was good ground, and that his father had bought it during a period when farmland in Champaign County was being consolidated, and that it had always been leased to a good family. Gloria said, "I want a first right of purchase clause." The attorney looked at Robert. Robert looked at Gloria. He said, "Why?" She said, "Because I watched my father lose a farm he worked for 22 years. He didn't ask for it. I'm asking." There was a pause. Robert said, "Write it in." The attorney wrote it in. Paragraph 7. The clause gave Gloria the right to match any bona fide purchase offer on the 300 acres before the sale could be completed. The language was precise. Notification of the offer must precede the sale's completion. Gloria had 10 business days to match at the same price. The match required documented financing. It was 2 short paragraphs. The attorney who wrote them charged $150 for the language. He died in 2003. The Harlan estate passed through Robert Sr.'s death in 1999, through a reorganization period, through a decade of management by Robert's son, and finally to the son's daughter, Megan Harlan, 38 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, who had inherited her share of the estate at 28 and had been asking annually about the Champaign County grounds market value ever since. At 9:06 a.m. on a Tuesday in April, the certified letter arrived. Gloria was at the kitchen table with coffee and the daily farm log when she heard the mail truck. She brought the letter in, read the return address, Harlan Estate Management, Indianapolis, and opened it at the table. She read the first paragraph. The ground had been sold to a regional agribusiness consolidator. She had 90 days to vacate. The sale had been recorded on March 30th. She set the letter down. She opened the cabinet under the counter and took out the green metal fire safe box. She unlocked it with the key she kept on the same ring as the truck key. She found the lease copy, the 1992 original, with the 1998 amendment attached, the paragraph 7 clause underlined in her pen. She read it once. She already knew what it said. She picked up her phone and called Carol Jensen, not her attorney, her friend, and said, "Go, Carol. I need an attorney. Today?" Carol gave her a name and a number. Gloria called the number. The attorney, a woman named Janet Drew, 51 years old, farm law specialist, answered on the second ring and said she could see Gloria at 2 o'clock. Gloria made her appointment. Then she made coffee. Then she drove to the field. The ground was worked and ready. She had started her spring preparation 2 weeks ago. The usual sequence, consistent with every year since 1992. The equipment was staged in the East Field Road. She had seed in the warehouse. She had a planting schedule mapped out by field and week. She did not cancel any of it. She had 32 years of planting schedules. This one was going to happen. At 2 o'clock, Janet Drew read paragraph 7 and said, "This is a valid first right of purchase clause under Illinois property law. The sale recorded on March 30th was not legally completed without notifying you of the offer and giving you the matching opportunity. The notification came April 3rd. The March 30th recording was premature." Gloria said, "Can they reverse a recording?" Janet said, "With the right pressure, yes, and the right pressure is that clause." At 11:30 a.m. on the Thursday morning of the conference, 12 days after the certified letter arrived, Gloria and Janet Drew entered the conference room at the law firm in Champaign. Doug Spears and his attorney were already there. The court reporter was set up. It looked like a termination proceeding. It had the posture of a foregone conclusion. Spears's attorney said his opening. The ground had been sold. The recording was complete. The lease terms granted a 90-day vacate window under the standard tenant at will provisions. And the Harlan estate had fulfilled its notification obligation with the certified letter. He said this in the tone of someone explaining something to a person who does not fully understand the situation. Gloria's attorney said, "The lease is not a tenant at will arrangement. The lease is a fixed-term agreement with a first right of purchase clause in the 1998 amendment. The amendment is attached. She set the document on the table. Spears's attorney picked it up. He read the first page. He turned to page 2. He stopped at the paragraph 7 language. He leaned to Spears and said something quietly. Spears looked at the document. For the first time in the meeting, he looked at Gloria rather than at the attorney. A request was made for a recess. This is the moment worth pausing on. Not the legal mechanism, the clause, the matching right, the recorded amendment. The moment itself. Doug Spears had done 14 of these land transactions in Illinois and Indiana in 3 years. He had closed deals on ground worth collectively in the range of $20 million. He had negotiated with the state attorneys and county assessors and bank officers and tenant farmers who were scared. He had never once been in a room where a tenant farmer produced a document from 1998 that changed the legal status of a completed sale. He looked at the document for a long time. He looked at Gloria. Gloria looked back at him with the level, uncombative steadiness of a woman who had read paragraph 7 every spring for 26 years and had been entirely certain since 9:06 a.m. on the Tuesday the letter arrived that this meeting was going to go this way. When they came back from the recess, the conversation changed. Spears's attorney said, carefully, procedurally, that even if the first right clause was valid, the financing requirements for a matching offer would introduce timeline complications that the Harlan estate preferred to avoid. An all-cash sale could close in 30 days. A tenant farmer's financing, he said. He did not say this unkindly, but it carried weight, would take months. Janet Pruitt opened her folder. Janet Pruitt was Gloria's farm credit officer at the regional agricultural lender, 52 years old, and she had processed the pre-approval letter for the $2.1 million purchase price in 48 hours. After Gloria called her on the Tuesday, the letter arrived. She had worked with Gloria for 11 years. She knew the operation, she knew the books. She had no hesitation about the credit. She set the pre-approval letter on the table. 48 hours, she said. We can close in 30 days. Spears picked up the pre-approval letter. He read it. He set it down. He asked for 2 weeks to review with the Consolidators Board. He said there were indemnification provisions in the purchase contract that affected his authority to release. He said this was a significant complication and he needed time. Janet Drew said, the clause gives Gloria 10 business days from notification to match. The notification was April 3rd. Today is day 7. You have until day 10. She paused. If the match is not accepted by day 10, we will file to void the sale. Spears's attorney said nothing. The Harlan Estates attorney, who had been very quiet, who had reviewed the 1998 amendment during the recess and understood perfectly what it said, looked at Spears and said, she's right. That was the end of the conference. Day 9. Spears's company signed a release of the purchase agreement. The Harlan estate, Megan Harlan signing remotely from Columbus, her hand shaking slightly on the video call, which is what happens when you discover that an estate you have been managing imprecisely for 10 years has a liability that nobody told you about. Countersigned a sale agreement with Gloria at the matching price, $2.1 million. The same number as the Consolidators' offer, not $1 more. She matched exactly. Janet Pruitt's financing closed in 28 days. Gloria received the deed on a Thursday morning. It was handed to her at a title company office in Champaign. 2 pages. Her name on the title line. The property description exactly as she had read it in the lease for 32 years. She drove to the south field with it on the seat beside her. She parked at the field's edge and read the property description. All 320 acres. Champaign County, black soil. Tile drained since 1958. Her name on the line. She read it the way she read paragraph 7, carefully, all the way through, the way her father should have read his lease in 1991. She put the deed in the fire safe box. It sat beside the lease copy. The green box went back under the kitchen counter. 2 weeks after the closing, a letter arrived from Megan Harlan in Columbus. It was brief and formal. It acknowledged that the estate had failed to maintain complete records of the 1998 amendment and that the outcome of the transaction was the legally correct one. It did not apologize. It said, in careful legal language, that the estate regretted the administrative oversight. Gloria read it once. She put it in the fire safe box. She planted corn in the south field the following week. The equipment was already staged. The seed was in the warehouse. The planting schedule was on the wall. Everything she had planned before the certified letter arrived went forward on schedule. Because she had known since April 3rd at 9:06 in the morning that paragraph 7 would hold. She had read it every spring for 26 years. It had always said the same thing. Her daughter Leanne asked her the night of the closing, "When did you know the clause would work?" Gloria said, "When I put it in 1998. Leanne said, "But you weren't sure." Gloria said, "I was sure the language was right. I was sure I had the document. The rest follows." Leanne thought about this. Gloria said, "Your grandfather stood in a field that wasn't his anymore because he never asked for it. I asked. I got it in writing. I kept the document. The rest follows." She closed the fire safe box. She went to bed. The south field was planted 2 days later. The corn came up even and strong in the warm May sun, the rows running true across the flat black ground that had been the Tenant ground since 1992 and was now the Tenant ground in the deed, in her name, on the title line, filed with the county and available to anyone who wanted to look it up. You know what this story is really about. Not the clause, not the legal mechanism, not even the fire safe box. It's about asking for the thing when you have the chance. It's about understanding that the paper matters. It's about keeping the document even when no one is threatening you, even when everything seems fine, even when the likelihood of needing it seems remote. Harry Tenant should have asked for it. He knew he should have asked for it. He stood in that field road in November 1991 and told his daughter he should have asked for it. She asked. The attorney wrote it in. She kept the document. 26 years later, it was the most important piece of paper in a room full of attorneys. If there is a document in your life that you should have, a clause you should ask for, a right you should put in writing, do it now. Don't wait for the letter. Don't wait for the certified mail with the 90-day notice. Ask for it now, while the conversation is still easy, and the other party is still accommodating, and the attorney is still alive to notarize it. Tell me in the comments what document changed something in your life. What piece of paper you kept, or should have kept, or are keeping right now, against a future you hope never comes. Hit the like button and subscribe. The next story is coming, and it involves a shepherd, a mountain in Colorado, 50 years of grazing records, and a government review that met something it did not expect. Let's go back to the 1998 lease renewal, because that is the origin of everything. It was February. Cold in Champaign County, the ground frozen hard, the fields bare and gray under a flat sky. Gloria had been farming the Harlan ground for 6 years. She had not missed a payment. She had improved the tile drainage on the west quarter at her own expense, hired a drainage contractor, ran 800 feet of new 4-inch tile, and deducted nothing from the rent. She had established a cover crop program on the south field, small grain rye before the corn, because the ground had a compaction problem in the plow layer and the rye roots broke it. She had never asked Robert Harlan Sr. for permission for any of this. She called him in January to schedule the renewal signing. He was 84 by then, living with his daughter in Carmel, and his hearing was diminished and his handwriting had thinned, but his mind was sharp. He asked how the ground was doing. She told him about the tile work. He said, "You paid for that yourself?" She said yes. He said, "No, good." That was the whole conversation. At the renewal signing in February 1998, Gloria arrived with a prepared paragraph. She had written it herself with help from a legal guide to Illinois farm leases she had bought at the law library in Champaign for $35. She had revised it 3 times. She knew what she wanted it to say, and she had made sure it said it. She set it on the attorney's desk and said, "I'd like to add this." The attorney, Gordon Swick, 63 years old, who had been writing farm leases in Champaign County for 30 years, read it. He read it twice. He made one small change to the notification language, tightened the definition of bona fide purchase offer to match Illinois statute, and reprinted it on the Harlan lease letterhead. Robert Harlan Sr. read it. He looked at Gloria. She met his eyes. He said, "Your father's situation." It was not a question. She said, "Yes." He picked up the pen and signed. That signature on that February afternoon in 1998 was the single most consequential legal act in the history of the Tenant family's relationship with that ground. Not the original 1992 lease. Not the 32 years of payments. Not the tile work or the cover crops or the careful soil management. The signature on a clause that took 2 paragraphs and had a $150 drafting fee. Gordon Swick died in 2003. Robert Harlan Sr. died in 1999. The Harlan estate's current manager, Megan Harlan, who had never visited the ground and whose knowledge of the 1992 lease came from a summary document prepared by the estate's Indianapolis law firm in 2010, did not know the 1998 amendment existed. The summary document noted the lease start date, the renewal terms, the base rent figure, and the vacate provision. It did not note paragraph 7. It was possible the 2010 summary preparer had not read the amendment. It was possible they had not been given the complete file. It was possible Gordon Swick's office had filed the amendment separately from the main lease, and the estate had never connected them. It did not matter why. What mattered was that Gloria had her own copy. She had taken the signed original home in a manila envelope in February 1998 and placed it in the fire-safe box the same evening with the existing lease copy, the 2 documents together. She had bought the fire-safe box specifically for this purpose, not after the 1998 signing, but in 1993, her first year of farming the Harlan ground, because her father had told her, "Keep everything. Keep it somewhere. It can't burn." She kept everything, every lease renewal, every payment receipt, every written communication with the Harlan estate, every acknowledgement of the cover crop program, every notation about the tile work, every piece of paper that documented what she had done on this ground and for how long and under what terms. The fire-safe box held 12 years of documents by the time the certified letter arrived. But it was paragraph 7 she reached for first, because she had been reading paragraph 7 every spring since 1998. The way some people check a weather forecast or an insurance policy. Not with anxiety, with the calm of someone who knows what is in the document and is keeping the habit of knowing. She had never expected to need it. She had hoped, genuinely, to never need it. But the clause was there, and the document was there, and when the certified letter arrived, she knew exactly what to do. Doug Spears, that Thursday morning in April, had done 14 land transactions in 3 years. 14. Every one of them had proceeded on the assumption that the tenant had no purchase rights, that the estate's representation of the lease was accurate, that the title search was sufficient. 13 of those assumptions had been correct. One of them was wrong. He found out which one in a conference room in Champaign on day 7 of the 10 business day clock, when a woman in work clothes set a manila envelope on the table and said, Paragraph 7. His attorney read it. He read it in the particular way of a man who is reading something that is going to change his next several months. Slowly, without expression, with small adjustments in posture as the implications registered. Spears asked for a recess. During the recess 20 minutes, both parties in separate halls, Gloria sat in a chair near the window with a cup of coffee someone had brought, and she looked out at the Champagne street below. She was not anxious. She had not been anxious since the morning the letter arrived. She had been certain. Certainty is different from confidence. Confidence is what you feel when things are going well. Certainty is what you feel when you have the document and you've read it and you know what it says. She was certain. Janet Drew came and sat beside her. Janet said, "You're good." Gloria said, "I know." When they came back in, the tone had changed. Spears was still in negotiation mode, still looking for a procedural exit, still trying to find the lever that might move Gloria off the matching position, still proposing the financing timeline as a concern. His attorney was less aggressive now. He was reading from the document instead of arguing away from it. The pre-approval letter ended the timeline argument. 48 hours. Gloria had called Janet Pruitt on the Tuesday morning, and Janet had turned the pre-approval around in 48 hours. She had known the operation for 11 years. She had reviewed the most recent financials and the land value and the commodity price projections, and she had said yes on page 1. 2 pages. Her signature and the lender's seal and the amount, $2.1 million. Commitment letter, 30-day close. Spears read it. He set it face down on the table. He asked for 2 weeks. Janet Drew said day 10. The Harlan Estates attorney said she was right. Day 9. The release was signed. The sale agreement was signed at the matching price. $2.1 million, not $1 more. The ground is 4 miles east of Champaign, 320 acres of black Champaign County soil, tile drained since 1958, in the top quartile of county yield averages for 32 consecutive years. Now in Gloria Tannen's name, filed with the county, permanent. The fire-safe box holds the deed beside the lease copy. The south field was planted on schedule. 2 years after the closing, Doug Spears's company announced a partnership with a different agribusiness group and restructured its Illinois and Indiana land portfolio. Spears moved to a regional director position. He was no longer doing individual land transactions. He had learned things from the Tenant ground transaction. He did not discuss them publicly. Gloria planted corn in the south field every spring. The yields were in the top quartile of the county average, as they had been for 32 consecutive years. The ground was hers. She had asked for paragraph 7. She had gotten it in writing. She had kept the document. The rest had followed. There is one more scene worth telling. The day Gloria's daughter Leanne found out about the transaction, not the conference room, not the signing, but the full 32 years of it, was a Sunday afternoon in May, 2 weeks after the deed came through. Leanne had driven down from Springfield. She was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, the same table where Gloria had opened the certified letter. And Gloria was telling her the sequence: the 1991 field, Harry's words, the 1992 lease, the 1998 clause, the fire-safe box. Leanne listened without interrupting. This was not her usual mode. She was a talker, like her father had been, and she had opinions about most things. And she had spent the last 2 years telling her mother to consider leasing the ground to a larger operation, because the margins on a 320-acre tenant operation were thin, and the physical work was getting harder. She had said this kindly, and she had meant it. She had not known about paragraph 7. She had not known, specifically, what was in the fire-safe box. She listened to the whole thing. When Gloria finished, Leanne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You knew." The whole time the letter was arriving, and the meeting was happening, and the attorney was talking, you already knew. Gloria said, "Since April 3rd at 9 in the morning." Leanne said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Gloria said, "I told you when it was done." Leanne thought about this. She said, "Grandpa, the field in November." Gloria said, "Yes." Leanne stood up and went to the counter and stood there with her back to Gloria for a moment. She was looking at the cabinet under the counter, which was closed. She opened it and looked at the fire-safe box. She closed the cabinet. She sat back down. She said, "What if you hadn't asked for it in 1998? What if Robert Harlan had said no?" Gloria said, "He didn't." Leanne said, "But what if?" Gloria was quiet for a moment. She looked at the window, at the south field visible through the glass, the corn about 3 inches tall in the warm May sun. Then she said, "Then I would have been standing in a field road, like my father?" She paused. "But I asked." He said yes. I wrote it down. I kept it. She picked up her coffee. She said, "You ask for the thing when you have the chance. You get it in writing. You keep the document. You can't control whether they say yes. You can control whether you ask." Leanne said, "You asked?" Gloria said, "I asked." The south field was 4 miles east. The corn was coming up even. 320 acres of Champaign County black soil, tile drained since 98, in the top quartile of county yield averages. In her name on the deed, filed with the county, the fire-safe box under the kitchen counter. Permanent. She had asked for it in 1998. She had kept the document. The rest had followed. Here is what this story is really about. Not for lawyers, not for farmers, for everyone. You will have moments in your life when the other party is still accommodating, when the conversation is still easy, when the right to ask is still available to you. Those moments do not last. The Harlan family patriarch was 84 when he signed. The attorney who drafted the clause died 5 years later. The estate management passed through 3 generations and nobody remembered. But the document remembered. The document always remembers. Ask for the thing while you can. Get it in writing. Keep it somewhere it can't burn. That is the whole lesson. That is what Harry Tannen knew in the field road in November 1991, and what his daughter did differently, and what it was worth 26 years later in a conference room in Champaign, when a man who had done 14 land transactions set a manila envelope back on the table and said, very quietly, that he needed 2 weeks. He had 10 days. She had paragraph 7. The clause held. Leave a comment about a piece of paper that changed things in your life. A right you asked for. A document you kept. A clause someone told you you'd never need. Hit the like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The next story takes us to the Colorado high country. A Basque shepherd, a 50-year grazing record, and a review process that had never seen documentation like his. Let's talk about the ground itself. 320 acres of Champaign County black soil is not an abstraction. It is specific earth, the particular dark loam that sits on a limestone base at a depth that took 10,000 years to build. The kind of ground where you push a probe in October and pull it out, and the smell of it is something between iron and rain and time. Gloria knows this ground, the way her father knew it, the way his father before him knew it. She knows which rows in the west quarter run dry in a July hot spell, and which rows in the south field hold moisture 2 weeks after a rain. She knows where the tile exits and where it doesn't drain quite right, and she fixed the part that didn't drain right in 1994 at her own expense and has not had a problem there since. She has a record of all of this. Not a soil log like Ruth Beeler's, but a field notebook, one per season, the crop, the application rates, the yields by field, the notes on drainage, the cover crop performance. 32 notebooks. They are in a box on the shelf in the farmhouse office. She has farmed this ground for 32 years. She has never missed a payment. She improved the tile drainage. She ran the cover crops. She managed the soil. And she asked for paragraph 7. Doug Spears' company had never farmed a day of this ground. His consolidator's plan, which Gloria had pieced together from public documents after the closing, was to absorb the 320 acres into a larger managed operation, put it under a cash rent arrangement with a custom farming contractor, and realize the land appreciation over a 5 to 10 year horizon. The ground would have been farmed probably, but it would not have been farmed by someone who knew every wet row and every drainage exit and every place the cover crop responded strongly and every place it needed attention. The person who knows this ground is Gloria Tannen. Now she owns it. The consolidator's attorney sent a final letter to Janet Drew's office 6 weeks after the closing, formally acknowledging that the sale had been properly unwound and that no further claims were being pursued by Spears' company against the Harlan estate or the Tannen operation. It was a clean letter. Professional. It did not say that the attorney had found a note in his file from before the transaction. A question he had sent to the Harlan estate's manager about any first right clauses in the tenant lease, and a response that said, lease reviewed, no purchase rights noted. The estate manager who sent that response had reviewed the 2010 summary document. Not the original file, not the 1998 amendment, not paragraph 7. The attorney kept the note. He did not send it to anyone. He had done his due diligence. He had asked the question. He had been given an incomplete answer. These things happened in real estate law. You asked, you got the answer, you moved on the answer you got. He had moved on a wrong answer. The legal outcome was the correct one. He filed the closing letter and moved to the next matter on his desk. Gloria's ground was planted. The south field corn was at knee height by the 4th of July. Leanne called on the 5th of July to ask how the crop looked. Gloria said, "Good, hot this week will push it." Leanne said, "You checked the forecast?" Gloria said, "3 times." Leanne laughed. She said, "Mom, when the letter came on April 3rd, what was the first thing you thought?" Gloria thought about it. She said, "I thought, paragraph 7. Leanne said, "And the second thing?" Gloria said, "I thought, I need an attorney today." She didn't say what the third thing was. She didn't have to. The third thing was, I asked. I got it in writing. I kept the document. The rest follows. It always does, when you've done those 3 things. The fire-safe box is under the kitchen counter. The deed is inside it, beside the lease copy, beside the 1998 amendment, beside the payment receipts, and the cover crop records, and the tile maintenance log, and everything else Gloria has kept for 32 years, because her father stood in a field road in November 1991 and told her, "I should have asked for it in writing." She asked. He would have been glad to know. Thank you for being here for this one. If you have a paragraph 7 in your life, a document you kept, a right you asked for, a clause that changed things, tell me about it in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the quiet work matters and the document matters, and that 32 years of doing things right counts for something when the right moment comes. Like this video. Subscribe. The next story is already written, and it is waiting for you. It takes place on a Colorado mountain at 8,000 feet, with a shepherd, a 50-year binder, and a government review that had never met anything like it. There is one small detail from that Thursday morning in the conference room that nobody mentioned in any of the documents, and that Gloria has told only twice. Once to Leanne, and once to Janet Pruitt over coffee, 3 weeks after the closing. When Spears's attorney set the original Harlan estate lease file on the table to show that the estate's records did not include the 1998 amendment, the file was organized in a blue folder with an elastic band. He opened the folder and laid the documents out. There was the 1992 original lease. There was the 1995 renewal. There was the 1998 renewal. But the 1998 renewal in the estate's file was the base lease, the annual rent figures, the acreage description, the standard tenant provisions. The amendment was not attached. The amendment had been filed separately in Gordon Swick's office, probably clipped to the outside of the folder and lost in the 30 years of estate management transfers, or misfiled, or never transmitted to the estate in the first place. Some attorneys sent the signed original directly to the client and retained only a copy for the file. However it happened, the estate's file did not have it. But Gloria's copy did. She had watched Spears's attorney lay out the estate's file, and she had looked at the stack of papers, and she had known without needing to read them, that the 1998 amendment was not there. She could tell by the thickness of the stack. She could tell by the way the attorney handled it, comfortably, without hesitation, as if the file were complete. She had said nothing. She had simply reached into the manila envelope and placed a copy on the table. That is the kind of patience this whole story depends on. Not the patience of waiting and hoping. The patience of someone who has the document, who knows the document is right, who knows the moment will come when the document is needed, and who waits for that moment with the same steadiness with which she checks the south field before planting and reads the soil moisture report before she irrigates. She had been waiting since 9:06 a.m. on April 3rd. She had been ready since February 1998. The clause held, the ground is hers, the south field is planted, the corn is up. 320 acres of Champaign County black soil. Top quartile of county yield averages. In her name on the deed. She asked for it. She got it in writing. She kept the document.